Let's look at using backups to protect your system and files. Windows Backup in Vista has been completely redesigned from previous versions. You use NT Backup on Windows 2000 and Windows XP, but in Windows Vista and Windows 7, you'll use the Windows Backup utility. To run the backup utility, go to Start, All Programs, Maintenance, and Backup and Restore Center. There are two main tasks that you can perform. You can back up files or your entire computer, or you can restore files or your entire computer. We'll look at backing up files and the computer. Let's start with Complete PC Backup and Restore. The Complete PC Backup and Restore creates an image of your entire computer, which can be used to recover from a hardware failure. To create this backup, I'll simply click Backup Computer. The first step is to select where to save the backups. In this case, I've added a hard disk that is devoted completely to system backups, and I can back up my system to that hard disk. I could also back up to one or more DVDs. Be aware that if I choose the DVD option, I will need to be here during the entire backup time to change the DVDs that are needed. Although the title was Complete PC Backup, you actually have the option of including or excluding specific volumes within your backup. Notice that the C volume is automatically selected and cannot be deselected. This is because it contains the system files that Windows needs to start. Whenever you do a complete PC backup, the system volume is always included in that backup. However, you can include or exclude additional volumes on your system. So if you happen to, for instance, exclude the additional volumes from your backup, you're not actually doing a complete PC backup. You're just doing a backup of the system volume. In this case, I'll just back up everything. And that's it. I will be backing up to the G drive, and I will be backing up data on all 3 volumes. And then we start the backup. So to summarize, a complete PC backup backs up the system volume and any other volumes you select. All data on the volumes you select will be backed up. You cannot selectively choose the type of data to back up or individual files. You can back up to a hard disk or a DVD. And be aware that you can only back up NTFS volumes. Volumes that are formatted with FAT32 or another file system will not be included in the complete PC backup. Okay, and the backup's completed successfully. If I go to my computer, I can go to the G drive and I can actually see a folder for my Windows image backup. Inside this folder is the compressed files for this backup. Now let's look at using backup to back up files and folders. Again, I can choose a hard drive for my backup, or the CD drive, or I can also back up to a network location. This would save the backup to a shared folder on the network. Let's again just save my backups to the backup volume that I have created. And again, I select the volumes that I want to include within the backup. Notice the system volume is automatically selected and cannot be excluded from this backup. And I'll include all other volumes within the backup. When I do a file and folder backup, I can also choose the file types to back up. Notice some restrictions on the files that are backed up. Only files on NTFS disks can be backed up. System files, executable files, and temporary files will not be backed up. So in other words, only these types of files are being included in the backup. So even though I selected the system disk, the actual system files are not being backed up. Only the user files that are of these file types that exist on that system volume. Let's just back up pictures and documents. And we'll choose Next. When I create a file backup, I'm actually scheduling a backup that will run on a periodic basis. For example, I can run the backup daily, weekly, or monthly. The period of time I use depends on how often the files change. If files don't change very often, weekly might be sufficient to add protection for most of my files. If I change files regularly on this computer, I might want to perform the backup daily. When I choose weekly, I can choose the day of the week to perform the backup as well as the time of when to start the backup. And notice that because this is my first backup, Windows will create a new full backup now. So let's save the settings and start the backup. So to summarize, when I'm using a file backup, the files and folders that are actually backed up are based on the file categories that I choose. All of the file types that I choose are backed up. I cannot selectively back up individual files, only all files of a certain type. This has changed in Windows 7. In Windows 7, I will have the ability to manually select folders and files that I want to back up. For a file backup, I can back up to CD or DVD, hard disk, or a network location. Remember that with a complete PC backup, I could not choose a network location. Only files on NTFS volumes are backed up, and the backup is scheduled. Additional backups will run at the scheduled time. And you should also be aware that additional backups only save the changes that have occurred since this original full backup. So for instance, if I save one additional file, when the backup runs, it will save only that one file that has changed. It does not resave the entire group of files again. Now that I've created an initial backup, I can come back and change the settings. For example, changing the backup location, the volumes, the file types, as well as the schedule. I can turn off automatic backup, or I can also create an additional backup immediately. So that's using the backup utility in Windows Vista. The complete PC backup and restore backs up your entire system, all data on all volumes that you choose, whereas the file and folder backup backs up only the data that matches the file types that you select on the volumes that you select. You've seen how to create backups in Windows Vista. Now let's look at the improvements available in Windows 7. Let's go to the Control Panel, and from the Control Panel I can choose Backup and Restore. Remember, in Windows Vista I had two options for performing backups, a complete PC backup and a file and folder backup. In Windows 7 I still have those same backup options, however the interface and the names have changed slightly. If I want to perform a complete PC backup, I would choose the Create a System Image Backup link here. Remember that a system image is a copy of the drives required for Windows to run. As with Windows Vista, I would choose my destination disk of where I want to store my backups. And then I have the option to include or exclude specific disks from my backup. So for instance, notice that my system disk and this additional partition are selected automatically and cannot be removed from the system image backup. However, I can add additional volumes into my system image backup. Again, this is exactly the same as what you'd see using the complete PC backup with Windows Vista. The second option in Windows Vista was a file and folder backup. In order to configure file and folder backups in Windows 7, you would set up your backup settings. Again, I would choose the destination drive for my backup, and then I would choose what I want to back up. In this case, I can let Windows choose what to back up. And notice that this option gives me a system image along with a backup of all the data files saved in libraries, desktop, and default Windows folders. I can also choose a custom backup to where I can choose what is included within the backup. And here is one of the biggest differences between Windows Vista and Windows 7. In Windows Vista, I could choose file types to back up, but I could not choose specific file locations. In Windows 7, I can now browse the file system and choose to select specific folders to include within my backup, or I can include entire drives. Notice that by default, user data files are already selected as long as those user data files exist within the default locations. I can also choose whether or not to include a system image within my backup. To change the backup schedule, I would use this link, and you'll see that the settings are the same as what were available to me in Windows Vista. So in Windows 7, the two main changes are that the complete PC backup is now called a system image backup, And the file and folder backup allows me to select individual folders and drives to include within the backup.